This video is about how to get a created stitch into your 15,000 embroidery machine. So I'm starting off with this page in our manual, and just to let you know that there is a tutorial in here, a few basic instructions about how to get a created stitch into the machine. And this is on page 63 of your 15,000 printed manual. All right, but if all of those instructions don't make sense to you, I'm going to go into a more detailed description about how to make this work. All right, so what I have open on my screen is the Stitch Composer program, and I have a stitch here that I have created, and I am now ready to send this to the machine. So there's a couple of things that you have to have done beforehand if you have never used this program before, or if someone has emailed you a stitch that they made. As I have in this case, I've made this stitch and I have shared it with a couple of friends, and so that's why I'm making this video for them. So step number one is you have to have an STX file. That is a stitch file that will be read by the machine and which can be used as a decorative stitch on the sewing side of your machine. In addition to that, an STX file can also be opened up in either the embroidery edit side of the Horizon Link Suite program, and it can be made into lines and circles. Or if you have purchased the AccuStitch program, you can use one of these stitches also in AccuStitch, and you can create different shapes of objects for the embroidery side of the machine. But for what we're doing right now, we're talking about how do we get this stitch over into the machine. Step number one, you have to have a USB stick that has been formatted in your machine, and which is going to have the proper folders to write either embroidery designs into or else decorative stitches. So this design is open, and one of the things that I want to just also mention to you is that in the case of whether I had just created this stitch, what I would want to do is I would want to save this stitch. So I would come up to the upper left hand corner for the applications button, and I would choose Save As, and I would give this stitch a name, and I would save it in the proper place on my computer where I can find it again later. All right, so that would be a very important step. Now personally, when I create a decorative stitch, I always try it out first on my sewing machine. So the process is for me is that I will go ahead first of all and I will send this stitch over to my USB stick into my machine and then practice stitching it. If I don't like it, then I open it, I just come right back to my program because the stitch is still open on there, and I make any corrections that I think it might need. So let's just say, in this case, I've stitched this one out. I love it. I want to practice it on my machine. So my USB stick is in my computer, and I'm just going to come up to the Write a Design tab. Now, you do have to know that your Stitch Composer program wants to write a design onto a USB. It does not want to use the direct connect cable, and it does not also want to send it by a Wi-Fi connection. So you do have to have a USB that's been properly formatted in the machine. So let's select my USB. That's it right there. And so one of the folders that gets created within your ORD folder is an ORDF folder. The other folders that you see here on the screen are just some different folders that I've created that are on my USB, but the design wants to go into ORDF. So double click on it to open it. You're going to see that I've got several here on my screen of different stitches that I've created that are already in the folder. If I wanted to give my design a new name, because you know the default name on here is going to be something like 01 or design 1 or something along that line. So go ahead and click on rename and type in the name that you want to call your stitch, and then go ahead and hit the little red arrow, and it's going to want to send it over to the USB stick. In this case, mine is asking me the question of the 3 stipple stitch already exists, and do I want to replace it? So let's, for the sake of the video, let's just say yes. All right, so my new stitch is now in my USB stick. The next step that you're going to want to do is minimize the screen. All right, even if you know that you probably are going to be coming back to the program and working on it again, go ahead and minimize it, because usually that will enable us to go ahead and eject our USB stick. So come on down to the lower toolbar of your taskbar on your computer and just select the icon to say that you want to safely remove, and pick your USB that you want and it is now safe to take that USB out. So remember also, if you've never been told this before, that you really ought to do that every single time that you're taking a USB out of your computer, because it will enable your USB to last longer. All right, so I'm now moved over onto the screen of my machine, and I'm just going to readjust a little bit as I put the USB into the port. And let me zoom out a little bit so we get a fuller view of my embroidery machine. All right, so here we are. I think that looks fairly good. Okay, so next what we're going to do is go through the process of how we get the design into the machine. So the USB has been put into the machine. We're going to come to our home screen and we're going to go to our decorative stitch category. So turn that on and you're going to come down to created stitches. Once that has been opened up, you've got a whole 2 pages worth of spots where you can put your decorative stitches that you create yourself. All right, and we are going to be able to have 30 decorative stitches in our created stitch category. You can see that I've only got a space for one more. This is my 38th page out of 38 pages of decorative stitches. So, okay, what do I do next? I'm going to come up to the icon, which is I want to bring a design into the machine. Little arrow is showing it wants to come to the machine. So I select that first. And I'm going to pick the USB port. So in this case, I did tell you that I put my USB into port number 1. And I'm going to navigate over into the ORDF folder. Once again, once this folder has opened up, you're going to see that all of those designs that I had a while ago are going to be showing up here. Now, one of the things about this is that you're not going to be able to see what the stitches actually look like. They are only going to be able to be categorized here by the name of the stitch that you have given to it. I don't know if you've noticed before, but when you're in the embroidery side, you've got some options up here in the upper left-hand corner that are going to let you view your designs in different ways, but you don't have that option here. So go ahead and find the stitch that we want, and then in this case it's the 3 stipple. So I will select that, and voila, there it is in the machine, and it's ready for me to go ahead and stitch it out. This is just a little sample of the stitch as it's been stitched out. I just wanted to show you that this is the design as a single pattern. Here it is stitched out twice in sequence, and over here is the original stipple pattern that comes out of the Janome machine that's built into the machine. So you know, the one that I created is a little bit simpler of a design, and I like it quite a bit. You'll find uses for both of them, I'm sure. All right, so now we know that we've got this stitch and we can select it and we are ready to stitch it out. So what do we do once we have all of our categories filled up? If I navigate to page 2, you're going to see that I don't have space for any more stitches on my machine. So let's say that we have bunches and bunches of decorative stitches that we've created as STX files, and we want to store some of them on the machine so that we can come back and use them again. Well, there is a way that we can do that, but in this case we have to kind of go about it in a little bit of a different manner. We're not going to be able to save a stitch that is a stitch pattern like this, where it's the same stitch over and over again. So what I'm saying is, if I select my 3 stipple and I want to save it in the machine, you're going to notice that up here on my upper toolbar, I don't have an icon anywhere for saving this design. I can get a design out of a folder. You can see that down on the bottom toolbar, and I can open up new stitches, or I can throw away stitches. So let's talk a little bit about throwing away stitches. It works the same here as it does on any other Janome machine. Ever since the beginning of time that I know of for Janome, you would always select the icon that you wanted to throw something away or put it in the trash bin first, and then you would select the item that you want to delete. So let's just pretend that we're going to delete this 3 stipple. All right, and it's going to ask me the question, do I want to delete this created stitch? And I can say, oops, I made a mistake, and I can close it out by hitting the X, or I can say, okay. You have to be careful here because you're only going to get one warning. All right, this is your warning. If you really don't want to delete the stitch that you just selected, then go ahead and X out of here. Don't say okay. All right, but back to what I was talking about. Let's say I want to save my stipple and I want to save it in the machine. As I said, you don't have an option up here to save it as a pattern that repeats over and over again, but we can still save it. And the way we do that is we come up to our combine mode and we turn it on, and then we can select our stitch pattern. So notice when I turned on the combine mode, all of a sudden we got a couple of other icons showing up here on our screen, and one of them is that I want to save a design into a folder. See that one right there? So I want to save my 3 stipple. And just for the sake of safety, I just hit my arrow here so that it is highlighted in red, so that is the stitch that I'm saving. And then I can select my save a design into a folder. It's going to navigate to this place here where I can choose which folder I really want to save it in. Do I want it in the built-in stitches on the machine or the built-in memory, or do I want to put it back onto a USB stick? Got a choice here. In this case, I'm talking about saving it onto my machine. So it's black, which means that that's the folder that has been navigated to. And I've got some stitch folders in my machine for various projects and different things that I save on my machine that I use fairly frequently. So in my created stitch folder that I created myself in this area of the machine, I open that folder up. These are stitches that I already have within the folder on the machine. And if I page down through here, you're going to see that I've saved quite a few of them in this same manner. All right. What you need to do, just like with all Janome files, you want to give it a name. You don't want to just leave it at the default name of M001 because that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So select that little space there and then go ahead and type in the name that you want to give your stitch. In this case, I try to keep the stitch name the exact same name that it was when I was working with it in Stitch Composer and when I sent it over into the machine. So I just type it in, go to some lowercase letters and finish typing in the name stipple. And I will say okay, that this is the name that I want to give to my file. And up here on the screen, it's verifying that this is my new name in the folder that I'm putting it into. And so then I would say okay once again. Because it's already there, it's going to ask me if I want to overwrite it. And I don't really need to, so I'm going to say no, but that would be your choice of what you're going to do on your machine. All right, so my 3 stipple is there forever, and I can now close out this screen. And let's just say, for example, that I don't have this stitch here anymore. I'm going to go ahead and trash can it, okay? Just as an example. So I'm going to throw away my 3 stipple. It's asking me, do I want to delete it? Remember, this is my only warning. So I said, okay, it's gone. And now I don't have it available to use here, right? But where can I use it again? Well, I can come back to either all the way back to my home screen and select the decorative stitch category like that, or since I'm already here in a decorative stitch category, what I can do is I can just go ahead and open it up. I can open up any one of these decorative stitches that I've created here for that matter. And the thing about it is that if it's only been selected one time, let me throw that one out so that we don't confuse matters here. Oops. So there it is there. And I'm just going to put my fabric back underneath the machine and I'm going to stitch away, and I'm just going to show you that it will continue to stitch over and over again, even though it looks like it's only one time there on the screen. Okay, so here we go. And it's going to take a couple of seconds for it to do this. Let me back out just a little bit so it doesn't get too noisy there. So I'm just going to stitch and stitch and stitch, and if I had wanted it to just stitch out in one single stitch pattern, I could have done that. I'm going to go ahead and hit my lock stitch. So all I'm demonstrating to you is that even though it only showed one stitch pattern here on the screen, what in actuality actually stitches out is it'll just keep on going as long as you want it to keep on going. Okay, so that's how you get a stitch into your machine using an STX file, and I hope that this was helpful.